So, Claude, I'm so excited to have you on today. And just to get us started and get people to get to know you a little bit better, even though I introduced you already formally, can you just talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and a little bit about your leadership journey and how you got to be doing what you're doing today?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I love that question. I love the question of my leadership journey because I do believe we all have one. And I can hearken back to, being that person even in a junior high that people like to come to and talk to and get kind of solace and have a shoulder to cry on or whatever. I always want to make people feel safe. That is a big thing for me. And I always want to make people feel better, whatever that means to that person, than they did prior. So I'll swing back to my name's Claude Silve. I'm the Chief Heart Officer at Vayner Media. And I've been with Gary Vaynerchuk now, or Gary V as he's known, for almost 10 years, which is my longest relationship and my longest working relationship.
Oh, that is a long time. It is
When you get it, you get it. And I was one of those people that I'm an empath, a very big empath. And I was always told growing up, hey, Claude, you need to learn to think with your head. You think too much with your heart. You think too much with your heart. My parents said that out of love. But for me, it was like, I don't understand what you mean. I don't understand what you mean. And it took me a long time to really, I think, unpack this other side of my brain, which is more of the critical thinking side, the ability to not be so much of a sponge as an empath, but be more objective and to learn how to create and hold space for people. Whether or not I was teaching them tennis, teaching them surfing, I was on an outward bound, whether or not I was leading a team in advertising and we were talking about toilet paper all day, whatever it's been, what works for me is to create the space where people feel like they can just be. And whatever that is, they can just be is safe here. I'm not going to go back and tell anyone about it. It's safe. When they leave the time with me, I pack it up and I throw it into the ocean and it just goes and gets neutralized.
I want to capture that because I think the safety piece, I mean, in the work I do, that's a big piece, right? And we talk about a lot about psychological safety in organizations and all of that. But you're talking about something, to me, at least I see it as almost like a spiritual thing.
That's right.
We throw that around to create a
Yeah.
safe space, make people feel comfortable. And, in today's business world, things are not always, quote, that safe. You can be laid off, all of these things happen. So people feel a little threatened. How would you characterize creating that safety?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we're stopping here because it does need some definition of some sort. For me, it is all of it is rooted in kindness and compassion and humility. Kindness and compassion is the space here. This is the space. I'm the one that has to have humility. I'm just a student. I'm learning about you. I'm riding shotgun with you, my friend. I'm riding shotgun as an empath next to you. I'm not going to take on all your stuff, but we're going to have it right here so we can look at it. What is true? What is not true? What is working? What is not working? And I want to be that. I want to be able to, in that space, put my hand on your shoulder and say, I got you. I got you right here. I got you. And it's all good right here. There is nothing wrong in this moment because we're together and you're being honest and I'm being honest with you. I don't have to have all of the answers in this space. In fact, I might not have any answers. I might have some ideas, some solutions, but we're going to do it together. And you need to have a heart that is willing to move the ego to the back seat and say, how can I support you? How can I be there for you? There's this word called authenticity, which we all are aware of, and the real, the raw, the who we are. I actually think I've been using this phrase showing up a lot lately. When I talk about showing up, I'm talking about showing up in your authentic way. I'm not talking about showing up with your Batman cape on. I'm not talking about be someone else. I want you to be you, the consistent you that I see every day, or that I hired, or we spent 3 months looking for you and hiring you. There need not be a facade here. And so the work I think we have to do as leaders is to help people feel seen and recognized, and that they matter, in so much so that they can start to melt the armor down. They can start to feel that much safer, more secure, more whatever, to just come out into the water with me just a little bit, because I'm going to hold your hand no matter what. I'm not going to let you go down. I'm going to hold your hand, and I'm strong enough to do that. I can't carry all of you, but I can hold your hand. Who are you? Who are you as this consistent, authentic you? That's what I want every single day. And it's very difficult in a workplace with all of the mishigas that goes on in our world, much less the workplace. And the fact that we're on Zoom or hybrid, maybe we come into the office, but we've already been up for 2-3 hours. The kids have already driven us crazy. The dog is sick. I worked out. It was a terrible workout. There was traffic coming to work. I got in a fight with my spouse, and now I'm on. Okay, well, I might have a little residue from the past 2 or 3 hours. And I want to just be honest about that with you.
The rest of our conversation, we're going to unpack some of that a little bit more, because I think there's so much there, and so much wisdom that you can offer in, how you go about creating cultures. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about that in a little bit, because we are talking about culture and what is that, right? But keep going on your leadership journey if you had anything else to add, because I interrupted you in there because I had to stop you on the safety. Yeah.
I love it. I can remember, so I always knew I was good with people, and I really love human behavior. Why? Well, because I knew I needed to figure my human behavior out, because I was kind of going nowhere fast in my late adolescent years. And I really dove into deep psychology, deep human development, Jungian, humanistic, positive psychology, and spirituality. And you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, what I'm talking about is spiritual. I don't say that often, because it's not everyone that wants to talk about that in a workplace, but I'm talking about love, and I'm talking about leading with love, and not being afraid to do that, not being afraid to expose some of my warts and some of my vulnerability and some of the times I've fallen down, because I'm just like you, my friend, and we have similar emotions. So I take all of that with me in my backpack every single day, and figure out what do we want to use in this particular instance with this particular issue or this conversation. And what I'll say is, sports taught me a lot about leadership, a lot about team building, a lot about what it's like to pass the ball to someone else, what it's like to cheer on the sidelines. And my Nana, who I talk about quite a bit, my Nana called me Heart. We called each other Heart.
Wow.
She died at 101 a few years ago. So she had the benefit of knowing I had the title Chief Heart Officer. And Nana was a leader without knowing she was a leader. Like, she worked until she was 85, right? She started working at 6 in Michigan somewhere, and worked until she was 85, and then volunteered at the hospital forever. When I would take Nana into Trader Joe's, I would take her to the flower store, whatever I was doing, and she would hand her credit card over, and the teller would hand, here you go, thank you so much. She would look at the name tag right here, and the name tag said Reggie, and she would say, Reggie. Reggie would look at her and say, would you do me a favor and have a peaceful day?
Mm.
And then she would walk out.
Wow.
That's leadership to me.
Mm.
Leaving someone better than you found them, and being the person that people want in that room, to inspire, to love, to invoke, to hold, to laugh with. No one wants fear. There's enough fear out there. We have enough fear in between our ears here.
Mm-hmm.
So my journey has really been very organic, and very much that of picking up bits and pieces here based on what feels right for me, what I need, what I've seen from wonderful people around me. And also I would say, positive psychology has been a gift to me, because I never understood when I was going through Psych 101, I didn't understand why there was something called abnormal psych. Why would we ever call someone abnormal in a psychological setting? Why would we do that? So I was so thrilled when this school of thought came about, and there were other ways to look at human and human potential.
Right. I love that because it really is all about human potential, what you're talking about. And it's interesting. You say your title is Chief Heart Officer, right?
Yeah.
So did you make that up, or was that, so
Yeah.
talk about that, because that's, because you mentioned, you work for VaynerMedia, right? And you mentioned you work for Gary Vee, which I think people recognize, but Chief Heart Officer, like,
Yeah.
so that wasn't you?
No,
I love it. I love it. I think that's exactly what that role
exactly
is.
what it is.
Right.
So just briefly, I had been at Vayner for about a year. Gary hired me when I was living in London. I was the first SVP that he hired, running a very big book of business here in the States. And I was one of the oldest people. And when he and I met, it was just like brother, sister, kind of like, I got you, you got me. And we hit it off on how we see people and our optimism. So I was working here for a year. He had me going to other offices and, go do that thing that you do, Claude, which I was like, oh, you get it. You see it.
Not sure what it is, right? That magic. Because
Right.
it is magic.
Magic. Well, it's heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so on my year anniversary, I said, thank you so much. It's been a great place. I was 45 already. I no longer want to do advertising. Thank you, though. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, I only care about people. I only care about the heartbeat of this place.
Wow.
And then maybe 9 months later, I actually had resigned. He called me, we had breakfast, and he said, you're coming back and you're going to be Chief Heart Officer and you are going to scale me. And so every day, my only job description, as I asked, how do we know if I'm successful, right? I know what Chief Heart Officer means, but how do we know that 2,000 people are going to know what it means? The job description is to touch every single human being and to infuse the agency with empathy. And I have to figure out how to do that in every situation and scale that and teach that and train it, and also take my hands off of it to see someone else do it, so that we can have other Chief Heart Officers or culture champions. And that's what we're doing. I already said leadership is love. Mm. Every single human being has the same operating system, which is our heart. And every organization is run by what? Human beings that have a heart. It makes perfect sense to me. And maybe that's because I'm just going on intuition and common sense without clouding it, without big words and jargon and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I go back to our needs are not that different. So if I need tenderness, if I need honesty, if I need transparent communication, I'm going to just take a wild guess that you do too, and you deserve it.
It's the human basics. And it's interesting in my work. I work with so many leaders on a daily basis in the work that I do in leadership development and coaching and similar. I mean, it's what you do, right? It's so interesting that when we use these words, right? I use the words magic, heart, love. At first, it's almost like a little scary sometimes to people. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute, we're in a business setting. But I find, and I'm curious about what you think, Claude, is that I find that when you open that up, it's just amazing how people respond. And I think it's almost like refreshing in a way.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to, I mean, I know, you might have a little bit of a different culture and you're attracting the type of people that will respond to that. But how have you been able to build that culture with that doubt or that discomfort around, well, this is the workplace, this is.
Right. Well, we're very forthcoming in our interview process and in anything about. If you're following Gary Vaynerchuk, you know what he's all about. yes, he's about success, but there are ways in which to get to success. And one of them is called patience. And one of them is called kindness. And one of them is called this and that. And everything is embodied with emotional intelligence. If you're coming into this workplace, your first 3 days are going to be spent in an orientation process, in an orientation with other people. Might be a C-suite person, you might be a copywriter, and we are going to be talking to you about how we do things, why we do things this way, our strategies and whatnot. And everything is baked into the creation of culture. And we believe the creation of culture starts with humanity, humans being humans. So that's really, in our interview process, you're going to hear that from us. You're going to come to me in 5 months and 6 months and say, is the honeymoon going to end? And I'm going to say, oh gosh, that's funny. I don't think so, but come back and see me in a year. The honeymoon didn't end. The honeymoon didn't end. That's not to say we're utopic, because we're not. There's all kinds of, we're human beings, and there's issues every day, because we're dealing with life on life's terms and business.
And people are inherently dysfunctional when they get together. I mean, that's
Yes.
inherent, right? I mean,
what we want to do, and the message you will always get from me, is my job is to do my very best to make everyone feel safe and seen, and that they belong. And those are the 3 things I will say over and over and over again. And Gary will also say, I'm here to make you feel safe. I work for 2,000 people. They don't work for me. I am here to be of service. And I believe our leaders are here to be of service. And where I don't see that happening, those are conversations to have.
Yeah. So you have clear definition of what the culture you're trying to create.
Very, very clear. We have nothing written on the walls. Why? Well, because it has to become actionable, and then it becomes a habit. And I don't want anything that says we are empathetic. Because you know what? People say all the time, well, what is empathy? And can you teach empathy? And what I say to them is, empathy is an emotion. The actions, the output, are kindness and compassion. And we learn that as an 18-month-old. We learn that as a 2-year-old. We learn how to be kind and compassionate. Somewhere along the lines, we decide to bottle that up and keep that for ourselves. And that's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother time.
I can't help what's popping into my mind, and I have to say it as I'm talking to you, Claude. I too have, very much an affinity for, Jungian psychology and, spirituality and all that. And I'm starting to bring that out a lot more in these podcasts, because I think they are so relevant, because I think they are relevant to what you just said, love. But it's almost like there's a synchronistic quality to your getting together with Gary and creating this. I mean, it's weird, right? It's like you were meant to do this.
Yeah. And in
what
Yiddish,
I'm getting as I'm talking to you.
You'd say b'sheret. It's meant to be. In Yiddish, you would say,
yeah.
And we were meant to find each other. When my best friend introduced us on email, she was our client at Unilever. She was running media at Unilever. I was living in London. She had just met Gary. She introduced us, and she said, I don't know what it is, but you're 2 sides of the same coin. We want this to be the greatest experience for you. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? Don't we want to retain you? Yeah. Don't we want to grow and nurture you? And don't we want you to then refer your friends here? I think so. Why don't we want you here? We want this to be the single greatest human organization in the history of time. That is our vision.
Wow. And that's a bold vision, but it's one to move towards. So let me ask you this. So how do you get other people and leaders in the organization aligned to that? Because that's a tough one.
It's a tough one, but let's go back to what we just talked about. You already know what you're walking into. So if you think you're going to walk in here and within 9 months you're a leader and you're going to be able to beat your chest and lead from an ivory tower, it's not going to work, because the body will not adapt to that organ.
Right.
However, if you are that leader that comes in and knows they've got some rust and they've got some stuff they need to shake off from the last 13, 30 years they worked wherever, we've got all the time in the world for you. We do. So that is the first thing I want to say. The second thing is I had to figure out how to scale myself very, very, very quickly. There's a team that I started. Normally it's called HR. I call it People and Experience Team. I had never been in HR, so it felt very incongruous to say I'm running an HR team. And also, I don't know what HR means, but I know what People and Experience means. So I've now given that to a person that is pretty much a scholar in HR, and I do things separately. However, we've got this great team. They've all been with me for many, many, many years. They all have hearts to help. They all want to be able to be the bigger person in every situation. They want to be able to create the space for people to be able to be seen and heard, and to be able to shift and say, I want to move to London. I want to do this. This isn't working for me. I think I want to quit, all of that. And then what I did very early on was remember, I had been here for about 16 months.
Yeah.
So I knew people, and I knew people that had a very similar DNA, that were kind, that had time for people, or they would make the time for people, that didn't have answers, but they had arms. Mm-hmm. And I call them culture champions. And those people that are still here, which many of them are all over the world now, globally, and I rely on them, probably about a handful of like 30 people I can rely on to say, hey, I just chatted with this person, Bobby. Bobby hasn't met anyone yet in that office. Can you go take Bobby for a coffee? Or I might say, hey, 10 wonderful culture champions, I want to introduce you to Sarah. She's been here for 5 months. She's on the media team. She's a drummer. She also loves Pearl Jam. Can you guys have some fun with her? And then can you all get together with her, 15-minute meetings, half-an-hour meetings to the next? That scales the culture. Because then guess what? Those 30 people have their own culture champions, and so forth and so on. And that's how it happens. There is no, sure, do we have surveys? Sure. Are they great benchmarks? Great. But nothing is going to ever replace this. Ever, ever, ever.
It's a personal, I mean, you're really talking about a personal touch, and you're talking about a lot of people. When 2,000 people is not a small amount of people. So Claude, for those that are listening, because I know there are people listening and saying, okay, that sounds great, but like, what do you do on a daily basis? Like, what would be the job? Like, I know we're talking about seeing people and creating safe spaces and creating culture champions and all of that. But I just know that that's what some people are thinking. So what would you say?
That my job, so let's look at people and experience and everything that needs to go into an organization to feed that person and their experience. So I'm not just talking about DE&I because it's hip to talk about. I'm talking about looking at DE&I as a culture shift. And how are we going to bring everyone on board that we're not just talking about BIPOC, that we're talking about neurodiversity. And by the way, how many people come in to my office or to go talk to the PET team and say, I have ADHD, I have anxiety, I have this? A ton. And we need all of those people. Today, my next meeting is I'm going to give someone some very, very, very hard feedback with as much grace as I can and love, but candor, because it's time. I'm going to go meet with our legal counsel because we've got a couple things to talk about on a global level. I do have 15-minute meetings with people all day long, scattered throughout the day. Hey, how's it going? I want to know these people. I have to know these people. I have to know them, right? Because we are so high touch. And at the end of the day, I want to know if you are having an issue, you come here. We're going to find the solutions. I'm not going to go, hey, Johnny said that Kathy is a terrible. No, that's not what we do. We go and we talk to other people. What's the root of that cavity over there? What's happening over there? Oh, maybe the manager lost their dog yesterday. I don't know. But going back to people and going back to life on life's terms. What else will I do? We're having our holiday party next week. I was talking to the security company today. We need more real estate. That's one of the things I'll be talking to our CFO about on Monday. We've outgrown our place. I'm looking at how can we reward and recognize people in our other offices where I don't have as much sight, or Gary doesn't have as much sight. So I need to hear what's going on. How can we, spontaneously give them a gift, or thank them, or what can we do to shout them out? So anything in education. I was on a phone call today about the curriculum that we're going to roll out for 2024. And by the way, we need budget for that. Where are we going to get that budget? How are we looking at our top talent, and how are we retaining them? What are we going to do with this bottom?
As you talk, Claude, here's the visual I'm getting. It's like a heart monitor, like a KG, and that's, you talk about the heartbeat, right? Yeah. It's like, you're constantly up. Oh, okay, there's the rhythm's off here. Like, what do we do? Like, it's just amazing. But we don't think of organizations and people like that. I mean, but if there is a heartbeat, there has to be a heart monitor.
It has to be someone or
some way to kind of gauge
care of it. Like today, a lot of people in the kitchen. That's fantastic. I want people to be back in the office when they can, because that's where you get the coffee talk. That's where you get the, hey, what are you doing? You want to go to the holiday party together on Friday? You want to pregame, whatever it is. You're going to go to the Jets game. So the one thing I'll say about leadership that I've learned along the years is consistency is key. Who I am today is who you're going to get tomorrow on Thursday, and you're going to get her on Friday too. And by the way, my family's going to get the same one on Saturday and Sunday. I might be a little goofier. I might have a baseball hat on. I might whatever, but I'm still going to be the consistent me. And that's really important, because you want to know that I can come to you and I'm going to, you're always going to have your arms open, right? You're always going to make time for me. I had a random conversation with someone, a very, very high leader today in the kitchen. And I said, you know what? I happen to have 15 minutes free. Why don't you come in? And the next thing I know, he's telling me about his mom has brain cancer. And he said, thank you so much for making time for me. I didn't make time for him. We both had an opening.
Right. The consistency thing, I think, is a big one. And thank you for bringing that up, Claude, because there's so many people that say, well, when I say, well, something about, how do you manifest this, or how are you be this way? And they'll say, well, do you mean at home or at work?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I mean in general. Like, it's the same, right? And so I think it's huge, because I think people are so used to what you said at the very beginning, bringing the armor to work. And
bringing the armor, like, you don't know me, you can't touch me, you're not going to infiltrate me, sticks and stones, And this is a place where we want you to grow. I already said it, we want to retain you. We want you to be with us forever. And being with us means either in our holding company of VaynerX, or, by the way, wouldn't it be great if we were able to put you at a different company where you were CMO and then you employed us as your agency? That's pretty cool. Or this place isn't working out for you, and I get that you're kind of like a B player here, a B- player here. I would never say that out loud to them, but I think you would be fantastic as a social media manager at Spotify. And by the way, we can at least get you an interview. Can't promise you a job, but can get you an interview, and they're going to pay you more money. Those types of things.
Yeah, and it's really taking care of people, right? I mean, that's really what you're talking about. And I think that's so refreshing to hear. And it's also so refreshing to hear from you, just the whole style and the whole heartbeat that you're giving. So let me ask you this. I know I'm running out of time, and so I'm trying to think, okay, what words of wisdom can I get from you before we go? So I'm just going to ask you two more questions. What advice would you give leaders who are trying to build we keep talking about employee engagement. I want to create employee engagement, or I want to create more inclusion. And I think you've kind of hit the nerve on that today. So what advice would you give leaders about those things?
I mean, the first, and we have spoken about it. The first thing I would say is it is so important to listen, to learn. Active listening, listening to learn. What are you going to hear from this person? You're going to learn a nugget about them, and it might not have to do with how they do their Excel spreadsheets. It might be how their mind is organized. Something like that. People will tell you what's going on, what's not working, what is working. So listening and then being able to transparently communicate. Everything I'm going to talk about doesn't happen unless you as a leader are able to have self-awareness and know that, shoot, today's not a great day, or gosh, I'm feeling more egotistical than I normally do, or I'm feeling fear right now. You have to be mindful of where you are in order to create that space to listen to someone. That's the real deal, because it's very difficult to be empathetic or kind if you're in a place of absolute self-loathing, or you were just triggered by what God knows what, which happens daily, happens on the hour probably.
Everybody brings all their stuff.
Yeah, they bring all their stuff. So the ability to have self-awareness, to listen, to be able to communicate transparently, which means, like, let's not pull the wool over anyone's eyes. That takes a lot of time and energy, and people are smart. Let's just tell people what's up, and you tell people what's up with love, with kindness, like I said, with grace, with courage. And I think there is this need for us to be more vulnerable. And by vulnerable, I mean real. Because going back to, we're not that much different. We might have different titles. I might be 30 years older than you, whatever, but we have very similar feelings, and we all know what it's like to feel afraid, and we all know what it's like to feel upset, and we all know what it's like to feel joy and happiness. And so the more human you can get, the more real you can get, the better everything is going to be. And again, in that conversation, you might find that this person doesn't want to be here anymore. Cool. Let's help you. You might find that this person is really not a project manager, but they should be on the account team because they're great with people. Amazing. So how would I know that unless I listened and took a beat to just really be there for you? And I mean that. Being there for another person, listening to see how I can connect them to others. What might be the next best place for them? Should I see if there might be a role in Singapore? Those types of things. But that's not about Claude.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing there is about Claude. And I'm not going to go tell Gary, oh, this is what I did today. No one needs to know. That's my job. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be.
It goes, everything you're describing there goes back to the seeing, right? It goes back to seeing, because you're seeing people's strengths. And sometimes we put people in roles, or they come into a role that may not be the right fit, but that doesn't then disregard them or yeah, I mean, they belong somewhere else, right? Or they feel like they want to gravitate somewhere else, but being able to see, takes seeing, right?
Seeing and being honest about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So as we part, as we end this today, do you have any parting inspirational quote or words of wisdom or any saying or anything you want to leave us with? To inspire, because this has been so inspirational listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I will always say the Maya Angelou quote, which is, people forget what you did. People forget what you did. People forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that how you make people feel part is the red thread. It's the red thread of this whole conversation we've had. And in order to know how you make people feel, you have to be awake. And you have to see, back to your point. That's a huge, huge one for me. And I would say the other thing that I'm always thinking of is, in my heart of hearts, I want to create a revolution of tenderness in the workplace. Tenderness does not mean entitlement. It doesn't mean delusion. It means tenderness. It means a softening and an understanding that we are all here in a very challenging time right now for human beings. And we're doing the best we can. And if we're not doing the best we can, how can I help you get there? So a revolution of tenderness is something that's very near and dear to my heart.
I feel a kindred spirit in what you just said. So I'm so delighted to have this conversation with you today. And I thank you, because I think we all need more tenderness, and we all need more safety, and we all need to be seen. So thank you, my wise woman, for sharing your.
Thank you. Thank you so much.